to Dysfictional, an RPG-focused podcast. I'm Tukey, former academic gone rogue.
I'm Ginger, professional film industry victim.
And I'm Randy, the random generator.
So we have a few topics for today.
We do.
First one I'm thinking here we can talk about is what makes a good group. So I know myself, most of my experience with D&D comes from playing with you guys now over these last few years, but I've done a few other groups before, some in person, some also remote. But yeah, what kind of experiences have you guys had with different groups playing D&D?
Well, I think I've talked about it a tiny bit in previous episodes, but my main experience has been with you guys, mostly because I've struggled finding a group in the past. And I've talked to a lot of people, friends of mine, and like people that I meet at conventions and things like that all say the same thing, like, oh, I want to play so bad. It sounds so fun. Like, I'm super into Critical Role, and like, you know, they listen to all the actual play shows and like they just can't find groups. So I've experienced definitely what it's like to have a hard time finding a group. I did DM for a little while, and I think a lot of people end up in that boat where if you want to play really bad and you can't find a group, you end up DMing sort of out of desperation, like, I'll do it, I'll make it happen, like, just play with me. And unfortunately, the group that I DM'd for, while it was going really well, they preferred to be an in-person group. And it was during early 2020 was when we had started playing. So when quarantine became a thing, we were no longer allowed to congregate. That group kind of fell apart because they really did not prefer.
What?
Yeah, they didn't prefer remote play. So it was fun while it lasted, though. And I did have a good time DMing, and it was a good experience to sort of have and helped understand like the mechanics and everything a little bit better. But unfortunately, we weren't able to finish that one. But that's the only in-person group that's gone more than one session, I think, for me that I've ever been in. I've been in a lot of one-shots in person.
My experience, I started off with a friend from high school growing up. She had a group and invited me to it. It was a lot of fun. We used to almost exclusively go to their house for the most part. They're a very cool group of people that we used to have almost like a potluck going on. We'd all bring a little bit of something, whether it's drinks or food and everything like that. We even had like a vegan there who was one of the cool vegans that, like, you know, would bring his own thing, and then, you know, often it was freaking delicious too. And then they would try to accommodate him as well as like the rest of the group. And usually, again, we were pretty okay with it. And we had two of the people DM. We had one of them that we ran for a little bit. He kind of got sort of frustrated that our group, wasn't taking his, I think, kind of campaign itself super seriously. It seemed like it required some outside research, basically, and I'm sure people just weren't really doing that. So he kind of quit midway, and then one of our other people brought up that campaign, or brought up a new campaign, and the same guy for the previous DM, we first of all, we did an evil campaign for the second time, and he was the kind of evil character that was like, he didn't work well with others, he was very secretive, hides things, and, you know, got actually upset the fact that he thought this would be a cool hideout for him, and then the group was like, hey, this would be a cool hideout for us, and he was like just visibly upset about that.
Hey, the real estate market is tough.
Yeah, I mean, this is true. I mean, that was like almost like a sewer or something like that. So just imagine like fighting over a sewer, you know?
The perfect evil lair is like really hard to find.
That is a fair point. And then we after I moved, and then someone else had moved as well. I was going to be remote with them for a little bit, but once one of them moved, they all tried the remote. I don't even think they went 2 more sessions before it was just pretty much cut entirely. Then I stopped for a while until, again, like you said, the pandemic was the best opportunity to D&D. And we did it online. I found Fantasy Grounds, and went to the forums to find a DM and stuff, and had basically a bunch of my friends I knew, and he was the DM for it. And then while I really liked, he was a really good RP person. I actually really liked the way he could just improvise. He was really good at that. But then there were a lot of aspects that I thought was lacking in terms of like trying to integrate the characters and the people themselves as part of it. And that's when I kind of wanted to try my hands at the DMing and one, have a little more consequences, but then also not have players that feel like favoritism versus like you don't have consequences and you have a lot of consequences and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think you guys brought up a bunch of good points, but I mean, I know myself as well. Like, so the first group I did back years ago, it was in person, and it happened to be, lucky enough, it was, you know, one of my roommate at the time actually wanted to be a DM. So that worked out really well, because then we had the sessions obviously at our place, and that one went on for a decent amount of time. But it was all people we knew, all friends, and all in person. So that was definitely a good experience. And then then the one we're doing now, I knew most of the people, but we had a couple of new folks originally, and then Ginger, obviously you joined in last year as well, and we've had others too. But yeah, I would say the remote one's been really good too. Definitely different styles between the two, but yeah, I agree with you guys as well. Another thing you said, it can depend. I know the one we had in person, I think we ended up stopping because we basically lost like one or two people, and then
oh my god, what happened?
Oh, you know, just terrible things. But no, it's just, I think they moved or something as well. But
oh, phew.
Yeah, it's like then you either got to try like a hybrid model for it to try to keep them in, or you do it a lot less frequently, maybe, or you know. But at that point, then you can lose almost like the momentum to it.
Yeah, it just fizzles out.
Yeah. I think another interesting thing with groups forming though is like everyone's different experience levels too within a group. So you know, whether you have a whole group of like very experienced D&D players, or maybe you have some who have never done it before, or some who are somewhat experienced. But I think that can be interesting too with different groups.
Yeah, for me especially, it was interesting because when I started with you guys, since it was my first actual consistent campaign to be part of, like I know some of the people were like, oh, you're like more experienced than us. And I was like, not really. I just have listened to thousands, like literally thousands of hours of other people playing. So it's like I absorbed a lot of like the mechanics and the rules, and like sort of got ideas of like how I would like to play if I got the chance to play. But like I wasn't really that much more experienced or anything than someone who's just played one or two times. I just have a lot of like years of like prep into it, hoping that one day like I'll find a group that will actually show up on game night.
Yeah, and we also, in just our group alone, had one person who watched a lot of, you know, the D&D stuff like Critical Role and everything like that, and had the knowledge of it, but had never played it. And then someone else who I believe had maybe a tiny bit of knowledge, but was overall just brand new. And then I have one of my friends who's pretty much played since 2A or whatever D&D. And then me, who kind of dabbled in it enough to get a good feel for it at least. So it was a bunch of diversity with it. I think what kind of helps make a group good, well, first of all, we're all very uniquely rare, where we're all very open to everyone's ideas. Like we criticize, but we're also very open. We criticize kind of more of the fun of it all. And at least half the group is fairly self-conscious about actually upsetting the party. And so it's always like the recomforting, like, hey, I just want to make sure that I didn't go over the line while my character was yelling and things like that. And I think that helps having a good establishment of kind of like a session 0 where you guys have the expectations and stuff like that we've kind of talked about, but like just the players being like, hey, if you're uncomfortable with something, or if this doesn't work for you, just let me know. We have one player who doesn't really care for the spotlight, and so if I didn't know that they would have their own character arc in the campaign. And then, you know, I've now kind of upset them in a sense because they don't want that to be their thing. So knowing that ahead of time, I was like, okay, cool. Like you'll have your own things and, get to participate, of course, but I won't throw, this whole side story for you if you don't want that.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, like tailoring the individual experiences to each person's sort of like comfort level. But you're also really good at like slowly and appropriately like poking people until they get out of their comfort level.
Yeah, Tiki.
Which is also, we're all looking at you. Which is also kind of a big part of the game. And like one of the reasons that like that's one of the things kind of RP is for, right? Is to get to do things that you wouldn't normally do or like do things that normally you wouldn't be comfortable doing in a good way, obviously. But also I think having a mix is nice because players that have never played or don't know anything about how people would normally play make wildly fun choices that older, more jaded like veterans wouldn't think to make.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just more fun to have, like I always like to have at least one or two new people. We're about to start a Spelljammer run at my house with my roommate and some friends of ours, and one of our friends is going to DM for us. And
wow, cheating on our group.
Betrayal.
Yep. The two of them that are joining us have never played at all. They don't know anything about it. And they're like so excited. And me and the DM are both like, we cannot wait. Like, because there's also, I think, always in every good campaign, there's always that moment at some point, and you see this a lot on like Dimension 20 when like Brennan has guests that have never played before. There's always that moment where people go from, oh, this is really fun, I'm having fun with my friends, I'm playing a game, to like, oh, something real just happened and now I'm invested.
Oh, it just got serious.
Yeah, and that to me is like what it's all about, is like that moment where you can see their face go from like, oh, this is a fun game, to like, something actually happened in my real life just now that ruined me forever.
Along the lines, one of our players wanted to be a sidekick character because they didn't want to be committed to a campaign and then have to take out a session and stuff like that. And then we either have to stop or wait for that person to come back or have to write the character off for a while. But then after just a few sessions and her getting one shot because she was a literal snake, I turned that snake into a basically bigger snake, a little more health appropriate to kind of the players, but still really weak. But as a snake spellcaster, a bunch of, kind of fun flavoring to it, even though the sidekick kind of archetypes don't technically allow for that because you got to be able to have a voice, but hey, and she had a voice, so it was great. And then over time, she was a part of another player who was a Yuan Ti, and they were of course together and stuff. And then it slowly built up where she actually became like the avatar of a deity kind of thing, and it kind of made her into a full-fledged character at that point, rather than having these sidekick limitations that they kind of tend to have. And she loved it, and then ever since then she's been full-on characters, and it's been great.
And that's a great example of like easing someone in as well.
Very true.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, obviously we can already tell each of us are mentioning kind of different things about what makes a good group and the dynamics, but there's really no right answer, right? So like anyone out there listening, like, maybe you have a group with close friends. Maybe it's a group of people you met online. Maybe it's a group that focuses on combat and they don't really like RP. Or maybe you have a group that is the complete opposite and really focuses on RP. Or maybe it's a mix of those. Like, I think that's been the interesting thing, or just in general, the interesting thing with D&D is that there's literally no right way to do it, as long as the DM doesn't kill their players.
The only wrong way to do it is when you're not having fun.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So like that's like when you're putting a group together and say, it's you're playing maybe with people you don't know or people you do know, but like, you can even have those conversations a little bit in, be like, hey, it'd be nice to, is anyone interested in RP? Say, it starts off more combat oriented, or maybe there's not a lot of RP and you don't want to participate in it. Then you can have those conversations. You just say, oh, I'm enjoying the sessions and stuff, but I'm not like as, crazy into it. And I think the most important thing, we've kind of mentioned this before, like I know our group is pretty understanding of each person and what they like to do and not like stepping over that. And yeah, like communicating with each other as well, just making sure everyone's good with what's going on. And yeah, again, no right way or wrong way to really do it. Just try to make sure your group is having fun.
I think one way to nudge people into the closest thing that we could say is a right way to do it is you have to keep in mind that D&D is about a group. It's not just about yourself. And for the DM, it's not about the DM versus the players. It's about the DM telling a story and then the players are involved and you throwing in the challenges and stuff like that. But then the player should always be mindful that I'm with a group. Why am I with the group? And to kind of toes with that. Like, yeah, you could have a PvP style campaign and stuff, and that's a whole different kind of beast to tackle. But for the most part, it's about coming together and getting over obstacles as a group, as a team. And so don't have a character that's like, I'm the loner who doesn't work well with others and doesn't evolve from that. Even like you could be that character, but be open to the evolution of it. Like have it as become the character quirk of it where you're like, I guess I'll ask for your help this time because I'm not strong enough to open the door. And then kind of slowly build in the one person of the group that's like, oh, I'm going to make you my best friend.
Yeah. I've been both of those people. I've been I'm going to make you my new best friend person. And I've also been I don't work well with others person. And I ended up with best friends both times.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
It works out. Yeah, that's a really good point is just remember it's a co-op experience. Even if you're doing PvP, it's still co-op because you have to, as players, like figure out how that's going to work in the world. And still like be fun for everybody, because the last thing you want is for anybody to feel like it was a waste of their time, especially if you're, in a dedicated group that plays regularly. It's like the biggest challenge for any game is scheduling.
Yes.
And you want to make that time, like setting that time apart, like worth it.
And even like, while scheduling is the bane of all existences, this group is not only surprisingly really good at scheduling and sometimes even last minutes, like we even this week have a delay on our group, but we're almost always available and we always have the backup days. And I think that helps to always assume that like, okay, if this day doesn't work, we've got a backup day in the next day or two, or we'll open up the availabilities. And we just happen to be a group of people that, are the typical low life nerds, so we're like, yeah, I mean, I was gonna do it anyway. I joked to one of our group members that I was like, it's really great with this group, but it's also like, well, I'm either gonna be playing D&D or another game, so either way I'm gonna be playing something.
I mean, that's definitely a sign of a good group. Like if you're willing, I mean, we've even said this before, but like, we would rather make sure everybody is there and like in a good place to play than just find another night. You know what I mean? Like we can always work with it and find another night. And we'd rather do that than just like have someone in a bad place or something, So I think that's been really good.
Most of us also, I think, carry our plans around D&D rather than like having plans and then the potential of them conflicting. Like we try to avoid as much as possible. I think that could tell a dedication to our group as well, that they will work around the D&D schedule, not against it. And so we have had very little conflicts, and usually the conflicts are like, health reasons or because we've got relatives that just decided to come down a week ago or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, we've all kind of said it, but it's a group experience, right? So yeah, being flexible, working around people, considering others. And I think actually this really transitions well into another topic I wanted to bring up tonight, but playing a campaign respectfully.
Oh, so smooth.
I know. But, I think this is something that comes up a lot. Again, we've said this, but it's, it's a group experience. But obviously you have your character, you have things that you want to do, from a DM perspective, there's story involved and how you tell the story. But yeah, I mean, playing, I think a campaign in general respectfully can be really, really important. And honestly, sometimes tricky to figure out, right? Because everyone has different things they're looking for to get out of it, or different ways they play. But yeah, what do you guys think?
I'd say it definitely ties in with like finding a group that matches your style as well, like tying them even a little more together. Because I feel like a lot of times if there are conflicts within groups, it's because the play styles don't match. And sometimes it's okay. Like, even if it's like, okay, it's my really good friends. We do everything together. We work together. We go to movies together. Like, we're really good friends. But like, we try to run a session and somebody's like, I am not into this. It's like, it's okay for them to not be in the group if they don't like it, or for you to, find other people. And sometimes you just have to keep looking to find that perfect match. And again, going back to there's no wrong way, I have met people whose groups just differed so wildly. Like, I didn't even know there were groups out there like this. I talked to a friend of mine a few months ago who actually lives down in Florida, and he was telling me that their group, they play in an online server situation. They have like 30 players and like 4 DMs or something.
Wow.
And it's basically like a constantly running server. And whenever you want to play, you just hop on and you hop into like whoever's on, like whatever's going on. Like, they've basically created like Skyrim or Warcraft, but it's D&D. And he's like, oh yeah, we've been playing in this setting for like years and years. And people will drop off for like a year and then just come back. It's like a RPG world they made. So like, that's an extreme example, right? Of like something really unique that they created to be able to just come in and out whenever they want to. And then on the flip side, I talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago who was like, oh, like our group doesn't RP at all. Like, not even a little bit. It's literally just like maps and dungeon crawls and combat, and that's all it is, because none of them want to do any character stuff. And I was like, all right, like, obviously that person found other people that were into that, and that's great. And it's still perfectly acceptable D&D, but I would hate that myself. I would hate it. So, when it comes to like finding a group that fits you, I think once everybody's goals are sort of aligned correctly and you have that synergy going on, it helps a lot. The respect kind of just comes afterwards, like naturally, if you're sure you're in the right place,
I also think that, as I've said before, kind of the session 0 being a good point to that too, and knowing, like, for a DM perspective, the feeling of it, because having definitely the types of like murder, the like torture, things like that players may not really be into. But especially with like this campaign, for example, I'm kind of pushing the boundaries on it a little bit, but also it being a part of devils and stuff, like they're, devils that are like the Duke of Pleasure, they're Duchess of Torture, and things like that like,
they're not as fun as they sound.
Yeah, they're really not, but they're a lot of fun to RP, because they are ones that like I'm even uncomfortable saying it, but like it's not meant to be a nice person or scene or something like that. And that works fine for us. But if one of my players is like, hey, I'm really not into that stuff, I go, okay, then we don't do it. Because I'm not doing it for my benefit. I'm doing it as a point across for the NPC to bring across, but the players have to be into it too. I'm not going to just throw them off, things like that. That just isn't going to be fun for them. Then it's not fun for me. It's like, I went through all that uncomfortability and you didn't even like it. Well, dang.
Okay, I'm gonna say phrasing and say that liking it is not what was on the table, but appreciating it from a story perspective.
Sure, yeah.
Was okay. Like Randy, I wasn't into that, right? But I was okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't stop talking about it. I thought you were really into it.
No.
Oh, it was
no, for
the
context,
trauma.
something
I'm
pretty
sorry.
traumatic. Yeah, something pretty traumatic happened to my character, but it was very intense. It was kind of shocking, right? Like everybody, but that was a big moment in the campaign where like everybody's face on the Discord chat was like, what? Like what just happened? And it impacted the story like a lot in a really fun way.
Poke the bee's nest.
Yeah, it was good, but it was also like it gave a lot of really good opportunities for like really intense like character development and some more like emotional scenes that normally you wouldn't have a chance to try to do, and like ended up sort of pushing myself with it to like react appropriately, and that was really fun. But also like afterwards, like on the down low, you texted me right away and you were like, you're cool, right? Like you still check in, right?
Exactly.
Just to make sure. And I was like, yeah, oh my God, that was amazing. Like it's fine. But yeah, communication basically is just
key. So key.
Yeah. And honestly, it's not just DM to player. It's also just player to player. And I mean, there's plenty of times where things, again, especially if you're RPing quite a bit, in a campaign, and like we were saying with our current one, it can get kind of dark at times, but characters might yell at each other, right? But ultimately, we always try to make sure, be like, especially right away after, just be like, okay, just so you know, that was my character mad, not me. Or maybe someone cries at someone and be like, hey, are you okay? So, I think that's the biggest
I feel
thing.
like all of these examples are me, actually.
I think they are, actually, yeah.
You do tend to cry a lot.
I tend to cry and yell.
I do in side chats, but not on session. So, yeah, I mean, it just, again, it's a lot of this, we already talked about forming a group, like what is a good group, right? A lot of even this playing respectfully comes from just time with each other. A lot of times you can kind of get a feel for people, how they're playing and how you can interact with them. And it's just critically important, I think, over and over again, to make sure that like, what you're doing is good with other people, like everyone's okay with it as well, and vice versa. And of course, obviously, like a DM, I think you said this, but you checking in early before we even started the campaign with like what the theme was going to be was a great thing to do, because then we were kind of prepared for it in a sense. And then even when we got to a moment like what Ginger just described, where, things got real, it was a big moment, but it was like not something where we could have said to you like, oh, you didn't warn us, or you didn't say it was going to, we kind of knew like that there was going to be some crazy themes in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, up front, I think I told Randy I just wanted to play by John Wick rules, which is everything's on the table, but if you heard a dog in front of me, I quit.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah, and I wouldn't like it either.
That's my one do not cross this line.
Scratch will be okay.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah, and like I'm the kind of person that is more of a warning to other friends anyway, because I kind of have a crude humor and stuff. But I think one of the things that has survived, most of my friends have been super long term. One of them I've known since I was like 6 or 7, and I still talk to him throughout the week, every week. And I think a big part of that is no matter how sort of vulgar or crazy my humor could be to a person, they know that it's playing around. There's boundaries I won't cross, and it's never in a way of intentionally hurting someone. And I think that translates to the campaign too, is no matter how like destructive that it seems like the campaign's being to the players, or specifically to the characters, or not the players, but like being to the characters, it's not there to just make you feel like the worst kind of person ever. It's to just give this sort of challenge and stuff. And at the end of the day, it's because I want you guys to overcome these obstacles.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that moment that we had spawned several of my favorite moments after that. So, you have to sort of you have to like take a step back for a second and be like, okay, where would the story like go from there? Like, how would that pivot everything? Because it really pivoted everything. Like, it kind of indirectly even caused the time skip that we had.
Yeah.
So it was a big pendulum swing of events. And you want that in your stories. You don't want everything to just be like one note the whole time. You want things to shake everything up sometimes. And it's a good thing.
And that was arguably your character's like lowest point, because you were already getting to a low point, and then this one like tipped it to where it was like, let's say the equivalent of at least the current character's life's version of rock bottom. And that's when, of course, you're like, your character was basically like, I need a change at this point. And like you said, involved the time skip.
Yeah, but also just like as a again, talking about like being respectful as a group and like finding a good group, making sure that it's a group that you feel supported by and like comfortable to try to push yourself with, I think is super special. I'm not going to say it's important, because it's really hard to find that, I think. Sometimes it takes, several groups to find a place where it's like, yeah, something crazy like that could happen on camera. We all just did that together. That was wild. And like next week, I'm going to cry about it. And I, cause there was a week between sessions and I had some time to process like, all right, that's like a very real trauma. That's a relatable thing that you can process. And I was like, I want to go into next week. Like I want to do it justice. Right. And I really wanted to like act it out the way I feel like it would be. And I thought about warning Tukey ahead of time, and I decided not to.
I was not warned.
I thought about warning Silica.
I'm glad you didn't even tell me, if I recall correctly.
I did ask you very briefly, like, hey, do you think everybody would flip out if I cried on camera? And you were like, what? I don't know. I don't think you saw my text or something. Like you didn't even.
I think it would have been something on the equation. It's like, I don't know, but like it wouldn't matter.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Who cares? Do it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought about warning because I knew that it would be a scene between me and Tukey, your character Silica. I knew it would be between us, and I was like, I don't know if I should warn him, or if I should just give you the chance to respond the way that like Silica would respond, because I knew that if you responded like super awkwardly, that would be in character anyway. So I was like, well, might as well just make it a surprise.
So, and then the funny thing about this being on the other end of it was a very quick, again, I had no idea that it was about to happen. But it was a very quick processing in my head of like, okay, hold on. This is a moment clearly you wanted your character to have. So it was like respecting that. And then immediately making sure, because, when you're playing D&D in general, there could be like, maybe people make jokes or, break out a character here and there while during a session. It happens. But it was like very quickly realizing, okay, hold on. Make sure I'm in character. How would they respond here? And it happened to be lucky enough for me at that time that my character's response would have been very like neutral. She's not, the character I'm playing is not like super emotionally intelligent, I would say, but they're not also like just going to trample on someone's feelings. Maybe now they might, but at that point, they, so I just went very neutral, and I think it, that was the best way I could respond, because I was not prepared. So I was not going to I didn't have the right, necessarily the right level to match it, but I was like, okay, this is clearly your moment. Like, let's play this out. And yeah, it was, honestly, I know it's weird to say it was fun because you were crying, but it was a really unique interaction.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, it went really well. Because I thought you did perfect, because again, it was like it was a very in character reaction anyway, which is why I didn't tell you, because I was like, well, if he's gonna freeze and not say anything, like that's what Silica would do anyway, is like just sort of listen, so it would be fine. Like I wasn't worried about it from your end, but yeah, it was really good. It felt really good, and then it ended with me basically teleporting out of the like just disappearing. And so I turned my camera off, like as soon as I was done talking, and it was just like, and then she's gone. And I turned off my camera, and, no one could see me, but I took like a minute to be like, whew, okay.
Yeah. Kind of shake the nerves off. You did it, girl.
Yeah. I was super nervous about it, but, everybody was like really supportive and stuff, and it was really fun. I was like, okay, that was awesome. Like I haven't done anything like that since, high school drama team or whatever. And it just like, it was nice to like shake off the rust and try something new for a minute.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I necessarily like have had so much the jitters doing at least the stuff with the NPCs in particular and stuff, because I'm the kind of person that believes that, at least for myself, I would do anything for the humor kind of thing. So like similarly, I can project a lot easier. However, especially like the moment that traumatized your character, still had that, that just didn't feel right, so like it's more the aftermath of like, I shouldn't have said that, like that kind of feeling.
Yeah, it was icky.
Yeah, exactly. Like, geez, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go take a like shower.
Go take a shower. Yeah, it was definitely like after that, I was like, man, we've been through some stuff now together. Like, I feel differently about you. No, I don't. But you were very convincing, which is good because that's your job.
Yay!
And a lot of these moments that we're talking about, right? I think the format can also have a big difference, and that's, I guess, the next topic I'm going to move to here. But remote versus in-person sessions. I mean, Ginger, you were just talking about that, a very dramatic scene between a couple of characters. We did play that out, obviously, remotely, so we're not in person. But could it have been different in an in-person experience? Would you have even done it if it was in person? I think there's definitely a lot of pros and cons of both. Remote sessions and in person. I know for me or for this group, we have to have it remote because we're actually all in different states, or almost all in different states. So there's no way we would actually even be playing together if we were not able to do it remote. But yeah, what about you guys? Different experiences and pros, cons of in-person versus remote?
I have thought about like whether I would have done it if it was in person. I don't know if I could have, because I spent a lot of like time leading, because for context, we don't usually turn our cams on until the session actually gets really going.
Kind of hyping yourself up.
Yeah, there's usually like some time at the beginning where like everyone's just hanging out, talking, saying, how was your week? Stuff like that, where the cams aren't on yet. And I was spending that whole time like basically trying to like get things rolling. I was like listening to like a song that I had on my playlist.
Evanescence, probably.
It was not Evanescence, but it was close. Close. Good guess. But yeah, I was listening to like something on my playlist. I was like drinking a ton of water. You can do this thing. There's this thing, because I work in film. I've been around a lot of actors. I've picked up some of their tricks, but like there's this thing that there's a certain way that you can breathe that can basically like kind of trigger almost like a hyperventilation response. I was like doing that to get ready, because like I can't just cry on cue. Like, I'm not an actor. So if we were in the same room, I don't know. I don't think it would have happened. I mean, it would have still happened. It just wouldn't have been as effective. Like, I probably would have just, had like a shake in my voice or something.
Or you had that one person crunching on a Dorito really loudly while you're crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been different for sure. And then also, like I said, like at the end when she basically teleported away and I just turned the camera off, like it was like her going and then me disappearing, like the silence.
I was gonna say a decompression of it.
Yeah, like the silence on the Discord was like, I was like, yes, like nailed it. And I think one of our other players like stopped the game. He was like, wait. We have to like round of applause before we, because I think there was just like this moment of silence, and Randy just went, well, what do the rest of you do?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
I still need to keep the ball rolling, guys. Yeah. Come on. React to this, please.
What do we do now? Like, crap. Also, because like that was our ride.
Oh yeah, I forgot you just abandoned us. Yeah,
yeah, I just like, yeah,
literally, like she drove home and the players were left staying at my house.
Yeah, and we literally were like that next. Our plan was the following day to go to your character's home. So then we had to travel there without you.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know. In person, I feel like it would have not quite played out the same, but that doesn't mean, I mean, obviously you can have those moments in person too. It's just, I think my personal level of comfortability with that type of thing isn't quite there yet, but maybe one day, who knows?
And that's kind of a good point too. Like the disconnect being virtual is both the pro and the con in the same way. You can kind of be a little more comfortable because at the end of the day, kind of slouch, away from the camera and, you're good. But at the same time, because of that disconnect, it's harder to feel more invested and involved, especially when you're on a computer and, oh, hey, look, what's on Facebook and TikTok today and stuff. And, kind of half distracted when it's even harder to keep the players invested versus, hey, put your phone down, please. And I actually would be a good point of respect to going back, but
for sure. I also, I personally, like, obviously, because we live in separate states, we play remote. But even if we lived in literally the same zip code, the odds of getting me in person every time would be super low because of my job and my travel schedule and stuff. Like, I'm often not playing from my house. I've played from the mountains in Arizona. I've played from, we've adjusted for time zones. Like, sometimes I get jobs in other states for like 1 month and have to come back. So like for me, it allows me to be more consistent because I don't have to be in one physical location.
And like, even just to bring that down just a bit more, like, I always remember driving home and that always sucked. Even if it was a 10-minute drive, it still kind of sucks versus, just clicking off and going right to bed, or like as we've done before, chatting for the next couple of hours. And then the moment we want to go to bed, we just click off and then we can walk to our beds and stuff rather than thinking about the drive home the whole time. I think what I do miss is the
food,
like the interactions, the food was definitely
it's the food,
probably the biggest part.
Pizza rolls.
I think some of the physical right, I think some of the physical aspects that you can convey much easier in person, the kind of like touching, kind of nudging, doing things like that, and you're trying to interacting with the player without like talking, is an aspect that's really cool and really hard to convey. There's the whispering, which, we've had the players where they kind of text each other as characters and sort of whisper talks and stuff. And that translates obviously easily to the computer. Tukey, you've had a hilarious moment when you were on cams and then as your character is kind of not a big talker and stuff, and they kind of pointed at you and talk, and you took a step back from your camera and you did this whole like, what, me? But you didn't say that, you just pointed at yourself and made that what, me face look, and it was hilarious. So like, sometimes the camera can work to your benefit too, because then you could like kind of pop your head up to the camera, like, what? Sorry, I wasn't listening. Or, you kind of have your aspect of like a gnome and stuff. So you could make a camera work really well for you in ways that it may not be able to work. Like, maybe if I was a gnome character, I'd have my camera pointing down the whole time, almost like, because all the players would be looking down on me. It's a fun aspect.
Or
to consider,
or even just our session a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago where everyone was going to do something and I was going to stay with the tank that we have. And so I was like, all right, I'll be here. And I just literally laid down on the ground and my camera was just empty for a while they were going into town and doing stuff. So,
yeah.
But yeah, one of the, I mean, you kind of mentioned it too. Of course, there can be negatives to it. I mean, one of them, the big negatives I think of sometimes is talking over each other is much easier to do remotely than it is in person, because you can see more of like the physical cues easier of like, oh, someone's about to talk. And that can definitely...
And delays as well.
Exactly, as you guys interrupt me right now. Yeah. So like, yeah, I mean, I think...
Exhibit A.
So it is though. I mean, it's definitely easier to interrupt someone on a virtual call. And again, not everybody will have their camera on all the time. So sometimes you might be seeing someone else. Or maybe someone can't have a camera on, right? Like I think we've had that issue before where like the computer can't necessarily keep up with it or something. So yeah, definitely there can be negatives. I mean, again, for our situation and for anyone else's situations out there, remote might be the better option. But overall, both work, both have their differences. I know for me, you were talking about like RP and stuff. I still have a hard enough time doing it in session to where if we were probably in person, I don't think I'd be doing it much at all. And it's just like different level of comfortability with it.
I think I definitely for in person too. I think one of the big pros for a lot of people is they like the physical interaction with the dice, the board, the minis. Like that was the thing with my group.
For sure.
They were really, really, really into maps and miniatures. Some of them are even like prop makers and miniature builders. So that's like their whole
I would have
hobby.
lost so much more money.
Yeah, it's a lot more expensive, but like, you know, they were all like dice goblins, which, you know, everybody wants to be a dice goblin, but like, and I will be the first person to tell you that the digital dice that we roll on Fantasy Grounds
Rigged.
hate me. They hate me. I don't know what Randy did to my settings when he added me to this group, but he was they are the worst rolls I've ever rolled in my life. Like I have real dice that love me that I never get to use. So I do feel that like connection with the physical parts of playing the game.
I mean, you're allowed to.
I know.
I mean, honestly, even just the sound of a physical dice rolling can be so sad. Like, I know this sounds so silly, but like the difference of rolling a nat 20 on a physical dice versus a nat 20 on a digital dice is like, there is a difference.
It's pure dopamine. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially if you're physically with the group and you're physically like everyone's watching the dice as it moves over, like lands on its spot and it hits that 20 or hits that 1. Yeah, definitely can be differences there.
Yeah, I feel like I literally roll so well with my real dice. I feel like Randy just wouldn't believe me.
Yeah.
You're like, send me pictures of all your rolls.
So I've got two things. First of all, I think one of the potential negatives is, of course, the technology itself. Like we have a player who, whenever he unmutes, his mic has to buffer, and like he's super, super quiet. Then you got to wait a moment, and now he can talk. So that kind of takes you out of the immersion for a moment. And again, while virtual is a little bit less immersive, even though you can have a program that has the maps and like all the other things that kind of can elevate it versus having the $7,000 D&D table that obviously does basically the same thing.
I want that table so bad though. It's so cool. I actually looked at it when I first bought the house. I was like, do I want to spend? But then I remembered that none of my friends can ever come over routinely, and I decided to save that money. So sometimes it comes down to funds. I definitely do think it's easier to set up like surprises virtually though. Like a couple of months ago, we surprised the whole group by having me show up on your cam for the first time.
Oh yeah, when you visited. Yeah. Yeah, that was a tough one to keep secret though.
It was. And it took them way too long to notice.
Yeah, it definitely took a while before someone was like, wait, why are you on the same camera?
We thought they would notice much sooner.
Speaking of camera and the spotlight, we kind of talked about this a little before. Randy, I think you brought it up, but how overall, you know, in these campaigns, again, knowing what everyone's comfortable with and respecting other players and in-person versus remote, but like, you know, how, as a DM, do you handle sharing the spotlight between the different players?
So that's a big... always fun game to play. And one of the things I think was a little bit of a negative with one of our other DMs that I've had before is that part of the favoritism, you could tell, like had a favoritism of of a certain player and stuff like that. But I'm a person who, you know, if someone hasn't talked for a while, I'll always directly engage them like, oh, your character, what do you think about this? And try to bring them into the fold. That way they have some involvement, even if it's just like, I agree, and then probably goes back to doing whatever they're actually doing or something. So aside from just bringing in the other players and stuff like that too, there's also trying to get each of them their own piece of the campaign. So again, I love incorporating everyone's backstories, and I want everyone to have like they belong in the campaign. Like you're not just the hero because obviously you're probably the hero, but like, why is it you? You know, aside from that, like, yeah, you're the hero, but why? So that sort of aspect is a lot of fun to do. And then even if you're a person who's quiet and stuff like that, as long as you're cool with it, you'll have your chant in the spotlight. Like we even had the person who doesn't like the spotlight, who had one of the most hilarious moments, I think, of the whole campaign, who had their legs lava'd off and just went from being a emo badass to be like, oh God, my legs, and just being super upset the whole time about it. Was hysterical. And yeah, that was a highlight of the moment.
I mean, the other aspect to this, I mean, you've been talking about the, from a DM perspective, but then there's even sharing the spotlight or having the spotlight as the player too, how you handle it. So I know myself, I'm fine with the spotlight, but I also probably over worry of like, oh wait, is it on me too long? So I also tend to try to find ways to interact with other people. I know this campaign, a good example of that was my character happened to be like the group leader in the beginning. And one of the things I incorporated in was like whenever we're talking and strategizing, I would purposely try to check with everybody or check with other people as a way to like bring others into the conversation. But again, it really depends on your playing style, I suppose, and the group's playing style. And, again, like you mentioned, someone maybe doesn't want to have as much spotlight. So don't like yank them into it too much or something, because then they might be uncomfortable.
I think the player trying to naturally engage with the other players is a great way to do it, so the DM doesn't have to, as a quote unquote. But it also works in the way where if the DM has a favoritism and these two characters just talk to each other the entire time and the DM favors that because it has a lot of fun with that, then it even feels more isolated for those other players who are like, well, can I have some time? I want to talk, especially if they like RPing and stuff. It could be a person who's cool with all that aspect. And again, that's depends on the group dynamic. But for the most part, even the quiet ones of our group, they still want to participate. So even just giving them the opportunity to say nah, I'm good, makes them feel like they were involved. I personally think.
For sure. I'll say from the flip side of that, sometimes, not necessarily just like general spotlight or like if someone asks you a question or something, but when that sort of like the plot, like capital P,
thickens.
Like when the Eye of Sauron like turns the plot straight at only your character and you realize like, oh, I'm in a scene right now alone and big things like are going down. Sometimes I freak out because I don't know what to do, which is how you end up accidentally kicking off a time skip because you thought you had a plan and then the DM was like, oh, they're talking to you and not the guy you're with, and you're like, oh, I don't talk good, and then everything goes really badly. It can
tap out.
Yeah. I like if I could have tapped out in that moment, I would have, because I was just like, oh, I don't want to be here at all and I have no idea what to say. My character is not good at this, but she's not good at it because I'm not good at it. And it went really badly, but then you just roll with it. Like there's no wrong decisions. Like the nat ones in D&D and the failures and like the bad things are just as important and sometimes even better for the story than the successes. So, you just have to give yourself a little bit of leeway.
See, your dice are helping you.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of times where like, an action you do, fail or success could kick off the entire next events. And maybe that can be daunting. I mean, not maybe. I mean, it could definitely be daunting for players as well. But it's like, hey, going back to what we talked about earlier, if you have a good group, like people will be okay with it. You know what I mean? And especially if it's within your character too. I think that can be big. Like when you're in the spotlight, how well do you stay in your character? Definitely different levels to it.
Yeah. And I think that while repeated extended failure can get really frustrating to the party, especially like we talked several times about we had several like what we sort of perceived to be big losses in a row, right? Where like they were kind of victories, but they were really unsatisfactory victory, like where you won the battle, but you just feel like you're losing the war. Especially in a campaign as sort of dark in tone as ours, like that can really sort of drag the party's morale down. And we started kind of seeing that a little bit. And so like, just because you are failing, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does sort of shape, like if it goes on too long,
yeah, for sure,
it can sort of shape things in a sort of more heavy way, where you have to figure out like, how do we climb back out from under this, like how do we move forward? And that's where, usually the DM will come in and throw you like somebody
Save us.
like an NPC that says something nice to you for once or something. Yeah.
Go back home with your family and have a nice meal.
Yeah, and then but tomorrow back to death.
Well, and honestly, speaking of, lots of failures and possible death, I think that's the end of what we got, and maybe we should head into a little bit of a lightning round here.
You want to make more grist for the mill?
Flash round time. This is where we take turns picking one aspect of a character that anyone can use. If you play one, let us know who or what they conquer. All right, you two, roll initiative.
14.
19.
Right in the middle, just like I like it. Got a 17.
Wait, what? Oh, okay.
Let me be in the middle.
Get out of here.
Ugh.
Yeah, but that means I get to kick things off.
Kick it off with what?
With the race, which is very clearly, and I exactly know it's going to be a Minotaur.
Okay, so if it's a Minotaur, then it's probably a bard.
Why?
That seems so matter of fact.
Does it not make sense? What else is it going to do in the labyrinth?
All right, if it's a Minotaur bard, I'm going to say that it's a College of Glamour bard. Very good at illusions.
Ooh.
All right. Let's see then. For appearance, College of Glamour bard. You know what? They're going to look pretty suave for a Minotaur. And they're going to be brown. Minotaurs have like fur, right? Yeah. We'll go with like a brown fur, short, some white patches on their face, horns that are kind of long, I guess. And yeah, they'll be like, middle height, but they look pretty suave.
All right. But for a background, they're going to be a hermit. Kind of just lived in solitude. But then like one day was like, I'm going to be amazing for the world.
Their personality trait is they dream big dreams about being famous.
Yeah, but because they're a hermit, their ideal is peace by themselves. But they do still want to be famous.
So they have to go on YouTube.
Yes.
Oh no. He wants to be an influencer. Could that be its own subclass, the influencer bard? Let's homebrew that.
You know what? That's fair. It kind of fits with the bond, which they bond well with children. But the secret dark reason is because they used to send them to the labyrinth lord because reminded him of the babe. What babe? The babe with the power. Come on, guys.
Why?
At no point did I know where you were going with that, and I was very concerned.
Power of voodoo. Who do you do? Do what? Remind me of the babe.
Okay. Phobias. Not being able to get enough subscribers. No, I'll stop. Phobias. I think a flaw or a phobia for our Minotaur bard would be that they've never really gotten a chance to play for too many people, and they aren't entirely sure, but they might be tone deaf.
For their item, I'm going back to the influencer thing, and I'm going with they have a selfie stick, but 3 sessions in, someone identifies it as an immovable rod.
Ooh. Ooh. Last name.
What's
Last name.
their handle, Randy?
Yeah. Last name Rockhand.
Ooh.
First name Areem. That's IREME. Rockhand.
It's a strong influencer name.
Thanks.
Nice.
Let's see what they can influence in the world out there.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this session and want to hear more, you can find us on Twitter at DysfictionalPod for our latest updates and downloads.
Original music for this podcast is provided by Joshua Silver, the artist known as Dimonon on Spotify.
And if your Ladron spouse is angry at you in autumn, you fucked up.